When my daughter-in-law laughed at my retirement check, something in me cracked. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shame. It was colder than that. Quieter. Like the sound of a lock clicking shut behind you. Before I continue, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by your own family? We were sitting around the dinner table, the kind my wife used to polish every Sunday afternoon until you could see her face in it. My son Daniel was at the head, carving the roast chicken like he always did when we visited. His wife, Lauren, sat across from me. Manicured fingers wrapped around her wine glass, phone never more than 2 inches from her wrist. My grandson, Jacob, had already disappeared to the living room with his iPad, like he always did. I had just made what I thought was a simple comment, a proud one even. I'd received my first official retirement check that morning. I didn't expect applause, but I didn't expect what happened either. Guess I'm officially old now, I said with a chuckle, holding up the envelope. Government thinks I'm worth $1,186 a month. There was a pause. Daniel gave me a half smile, the kind you give someone you're not really listening to. But Lauren, she laughed. Not a chuckle, not a smirk. A laugh. A full-bodied, head thrown back, cover her mouth kind of laugh that made the room go silent. Sorry, she said between breaths, still wiping her eyes. It's just, that's it. That's what you get after working your whole life. Then she took another sip of wine and added, no offense, I just can't imagine living on that. I mean, we spend that on groceries in a week. The worst part wasn't even her words. It was the way Daniel didn't say anything. He just kept carving, eyes on the chicken, as if the moment hadn't happened. I sat there, still holding the envelope like a fool. I get by, I said finally, quietly. Lauren shrugged. I'm sure you do. I mean, you were a plumber, right? Or something like that. I nodded. 42 years. She hummed like she was impressed, but I could hear the patronizing edge under it. Wow, I guess there's value in trades. That was when I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. She looked at me and saw someone beneath her, someone who had outlived his usefulness. And my son, my only child. He passed me the mashed potatoes and changed the subject. I didn't eat much after that. That night, back in my little house, the one they always called quaint, I sat in the dark and stared at that envelope. $1,186. It wasn't much. But it was mine. Honest money. Every cent backed by a lifetime of crawling under sinks, hauling water heaters, and showing up even when my back screamed at me not to. I'd never taken a handout, never asked for more than I earned. But that laugh felt like a debt I was owed. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to yell. That's not my style. But I wanted them to see me, not the old man at the table, not the punchline, the man who built things, the man who never stopped working. And so I got to work again. They say you can't start over at 65. That's a lie. You just have to want it badly enough. And believe me, I wanted it. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, like I always did when I was still working. My body didn't know I was retired yet. It still ached in all the familiar places, the knees, the lower back, the shoulders. Years of crawling through crawl spaces and lifting 100-pound boilers had etched their legacy into my bones. I made coffee the old-fashioned way, with a kettle and a French press, and stood in the kitchen watching the steam rise while the house creaked in the cold. On the counter sat the envelope again, unopened since last night. I didn't need to look at it again. I knew the number by heart now. $1,186. I thought about Lauren's laugh. The sound of it still echoed in my head, sharp and smug. She didn't mean it as a joke. That was the part that got me. She meant it. Deep down, she truly believed that I was beneath her, that 42 years of honest labor had amounted to a punchline. It wasn't just about money. It was about worth. That morning, I went out to the garage. The air was cold and the light flicked on with a sluggish buzz. I hadn't used the workbench in a while, but everything was still there. My old tools oiled and lined up like soldiers, my paperwork in the filing cabinet, and a dusty banker's box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were documents, deeds, contracts, tax records. Not many people knew this. But back in the 90s, I'd bought a couple of small commercial lots downtown. One of them used to be a tire shop. The other was an old law office that burned down and never got rebuilt. I bought them cheap, held on, paid taxes quietly every year, and never told anyone. Not because I was hiding something. I just didn't think anyone would care. I had always planned to sell them when I retired. But now I had a different idea. I pulled out a notepad and started scribbling. Numbers, contacts, timelines. My hands moved like they used to. Sure, steady, focused. I called the city office first. The clerk on the line remembered me from years ago and told me the zoning on both lots was still commercial. No issues there. Then I called Tony. Tony used to be my apprentice back in the early 2000s. Now he ran his own construction crew. We hadn't spoken in years, but he picked up on the first ring. "Dennis? No way. You still breathing, old man?" I laughed. "Barely. You still breaking things just so you can fix them? You know it." We caught up for a few minutes. Then I got to the point. "I've got a project," I said. 2 small commercial spaces. I want to renovate, maybe lease. You in?" There was a pause, then. "You buying or flipping?" "Building," I said. "Long term." "You serious?" "Dead serious." He whistled. Damn, what woke the dragon? I didn't answer. Didn't need to. He just said, "I'm in." By the end of the week, I'd filed permits, scheduled inspections, and walked both properties with Tony. They needed work, sure, but I saw the bones. I knew how to see through the mess. Every night, I came home sore, tired, covered in dust, and smiling. I wasn't doing this to prove anything. I was doing it because I could. 3 weeks later, I was standing in the middle of the old tire shop with a clipboard in one hand and a hard hat in the other, watching the first delivery of drywall come off the truck. The place smelled like dust and possibility. Tony was barking orders to his crew, but when he saw me, he gave me a nod, not out of politeness, but respect. The kind that's earned, not given. I didn't tell Daniel. He hadn't called, and I didn't call him. What would I say? "Hey, your broke old dad is quietly building an empire?" I didn't need his approval. I didn't need his attention. I had a plan now, and more than that, I had momentum. I had also started pulling together every asset I'd ever tucked away. There was more than I remembered. An old bank account I'd opened back when the local credit union was offering promotional CDs, still earning 2.4%. A modest stock portfolio I forgot about. Small, but it had grown more than I expected. Some shares in a plumbing supply company I'd helped a friend start years ago. He'd since retired to Arizona, and the dividends kept showing up like clockwork. All these years, I thought of those things as backup plans, safety nets. Now they were fuel. I cashed out the stock, I moved the savings. I reinvested, carefully, methodically. Not recklessly, that's not who I am. But smart, strategic. I met with an accountant, a real one. Not some strip mall tax guy, but a sharp woman named Helen who used to manage real estate portfolios for regional banks. "You want to build a holding company?" she asked. I shrugged. Just want to keep things clean. She narrowed her eyes, assessing me. You trying to impress someone? No, I said. I'm trying to protect something. She smiled. That's better. Within a month, I had 2 LLCs, a separate business checking account, and an EIN number. It felt strange, being official again, like slipping back into old work boots you thought you'd thrown away. But it felt right. The second property, the burned-out law office, needed more work, so I started with the tire shop. We stripped it down to studs, new insulation, plumbing, electrical. I oversaw every decision, flooring, paint, fixtures. I wanted it clean, modern, functional, a space people would want to be in. Meanwhile, I kept living exactly the same. My house was still quiet, still a little too cold in the mornings. I still drove the same rusted Chevy with the bad door handle. And on Sundays, I still sat alone on the front porch with a thermos of coffee and watched the neighborhood wake up. But inside me, something had shifted. I was building again, not just walls and wiring. Something bigger. By late spring, the old tire shop had been transformed. The cracked concrete floors had been polished to a smooth sheen. New windows let in morning light that made the front lobby glow. The walls were painted a cool, modern gray with white trim. It didn't look like something I'd built. It looked like something a firm in Seattle would lease for double the market rate. Tony stood next to me as we admired the finished space. You sure you want to rent this out? You could flip it and walk away with a clean profit. I shook my head. I'm not walking away from anything anymore. He didn't press, just nodded. I listed it quietly. No big signs, no ads. Just a few calls to people I knew. Word travels fast in a town like ours. Within a week, I had a tenant, a small medical billing company run by a sharp woman named Marcia. She came for a walkthrough, and 15 minutes later handed me a business card and said, "We'll take it." She didn't haggle. She didn't squint at the corners or ask about utilities. She just said, "This feels right." So did the lease agreement, $3,300 a month. That number hit me harder than I expected. I didn't show it, of course. I signed the paperwork, shook her hand, and walked her to the door. But when I got back inside and locked up, I leaned against the wall and let it sink in. One check, 3 times bigger than my retirement income. And this time, no one was laughing. The next week, I signed the contractor papers for the second property. That one was a mess. But messes didn't scare me anymore. Tony's crew would handle the structural work. I'd handle everything else. By now, I had a rhythm. I spent mornings on site, afternoons with Helen finalizing paperwork, and evenings researching zoning laws and commercial trends. I read more in 3 months than I had in the last decade. I didn't feel old. I felt sharp, focused, hungry. Daniel hadn't called once. I knew from mutual friends that he was between jobs. Something about downsizing at his firm. Lauren was picking up extra hours at the clinic she worked at part-time. They were still in their big house, still driving leased SUVs, still acting like everything was fine. But I saw the signs. The social media photos slowed down. Their Christmas card came late, and when it arrived, it didn't have a return address. I kept building. The second property took longer, almost 4 months. But when it was finished, it looked like something out of an architecture magazine. Exposed beams, track lighting, energy-efficient HVAC. A local tech startup signed a 5-year lease at $4,200 a month. Just like that, I had income. Real income, passive income. More than enough to live, more than enough to grow, more than enough to do it again. By the time fall rolled in, with the maple leaves curling and the air getting that sharp edge in the mornings, I had already purchased a third property. This one was a mid-size office building on the edge of town. Brick exterior, solid foundation, bad roof. The owner was an older man, looking to cash out before moving to Florida. I gave him his asking price in cash. He didn't even blink. Just said, "You sure you want to deal with this headache?" I smiled. I've had worse. What I didn't tell him was that I had already walked the property 3 times, alone, on Sunday mornings. I had already spoken with zoning officials and had Tony look at the wiring. I knew the bones. I knew the cost. And most importantly, I knew the potential. We closed in 2 weeks. This time, I didn't touch a single pipe or brush. I hired a full crew. Let them handle everything. I was done being in the dust. I had built this operation with my own 2 hands. Now I was going to run it like a business. I spent most of my time in a small rented office on Main Street. Nothing fancy, just a desk, a laptop, a coffee machine, and a window that looked out at the street. It was enough. Helen came by twice a week to go over numbers. Tony checked in on Wednesdays. We were growing. The LLC now owned 3 properties. I started a 4th one under a second company name. Helen said it was a smart move for liability separation. I didn't know the term, but I knew how to build fire breaks. Same principle. One morning, while reviewing lease applications, I came across a name that made my breath catch. Lauren Carter. It was a cleaning service bid, a weekend contract for the downtown office building, the same building I'd just finished restoring. I stared at the name for a long time. The application was professional. Logo at the top, business insurance, a competitive rate. It had to be her. But why? I checked the contact number. It was a cell phone with the same area code. The email address ended in cartercleaningservices.com. I went to the website. There she was, smiling, hair pulled back, blazer. Locally owned, woman-led, discreet, efficient. I leaned back in my chair, heartbeat heavy in my ears. She had no idea, no clue that the application was sitting on my desk, that the building she wanted to clean on weekends, probably desperate for side income, belonged to the same man she once laughed at over a dinner table. I didn't feel angry, not anymore. I felt centered, like something had come full circle. I didn't throw away the application. I approved it, silently, effortlessly. No words, no confrontation. Let her earn it. Let her mop the floors I built. Lauren started the contract the following Saturday. She showed up early, before sunrise, driving an older sedan, the kind with a dented bumper and missing hubcap. She wore a black hoodie, rubber gloves, and no makeup. I watched from the corner window of a nearby cafe, the one across the street where I sometimes did paperwork on weekends. She didn't see me. She had no reason to look. She parked, popped the trunk, and pulled out her supplies. Mop, bucket, industrial sprays, vacuum, moved fast, focused, efficient. There was no trace of the woman who once wore pearls to dinner and laughed over the price of groceries. This woman looked tired, hollow-eyed. She looked like someone who didn't sleep well, like someone who needed the money. A week later, I heard the full story from Helen, who, it turns out, played bridge with a woman who worked in HR at Daniel's former company. He had been let go 3 months ago. Restructuring, the official reason. Poor leadership, the unofficial one. They'd let go of a whole team, but Daniel's name came up in every hallway whisper. Arrogant, disconnected, refused to adapt. Lauren had started the cleaning company 2 months after that. Nothing fancy, just an LLC, a homemade website, a phone number. They hadn't told anyone. Of course they hadn't. Pride's a tricky thing. I didn't gloat. I didn't reach out. I just kept doing what I was doing. By the time November rolled around, I had signed leases with 3 more tenants: a dentist, a boutique marketing firm, a local tech startup, all small but steady. And every Saturday, like clockwork, Lauren showed up at 6:15 a.m., cleaned quietly for 4 hours, and left without a word. I made sure our schedules never crossed, but I knew every inch she mopped. And I noticed, one morning, the break room was cleaner than usual. Coffee pot spotless, microwave scrubbed. She wasn't just cleaning, she was trying. And part of me respected that. Another part of me remembered the sound of her laugh. The thing about humiliation, real, raw humiliation, is that it's quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It settles. It simmers. And when you've felt it, when it's been stitched into your memory by the people you trusted most, it becomes a kind of compass. I never wanted Lauren to suffer. But I wanted her to understand. And sometimes, understanding doesn't come through words. Sometimes it comes through weekends on your knees, scrubbing tile under fluorescent light. It was bound to happen eventually. 7 Saturdays in, I decided to stop hiding. Not out of cruelty, not to make a point, just because I was tired of pretending. That morning, I walked into the downtown office at exactly 7:02 a.m. Coffee in one hand, keys in the other. I had a folder of lease documents to drop off. I didn't expect a scene. Just a quiet moment. The lobby lights were on, the air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, and I could hear the low hum of a vacuum down the hallway. I walked in, and there she was, Lauren, bent over a mop bucket, earbuds in, sleeves rolled up. Her hair was pulled into a messy knot, and she was wearing old sneakers. Her back was to me. She didn't hear the door. So I stepped forward and cleared my throat. She jumped. The mop clattered. Her earbuds fell. She turned and froze. For a second, we both just stared. No words. Just the buzz of overhead lights and the slow drip of water from her mop. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. Her mouth opened slightly like she wanted to speak, then closed again. I nodded once. Calm, collected, not cold, just matter of fact. And I walked past her. I placed the folder on the front desk, turned, and left. That was it. 5 minutes, maybe. But it said everything. I could feel her eyes on my back the entire way. She never asked what I was doing there. She didn't have to. She knew. She knew the building was mine. She knew whose name was on the lease. And I knew, from the look in her eyes, that she remembered the laugh, the table, the envelope. I didn't need to say a word. The silence was enough. I got into my truck, took a long sip of coffee, and watched the sun climb higher over the street. It was a crisp, bright morning. Quiet. I liked quiet. Always have. That afternoon, Lauren didn't finish the shift. I got an automated email from the system. Cleaner clocked out early, 9:46 a.m. The following week, she didn't show up at all. I wasn't surprised, but I was curious, so I waited. 3 days later, I got a voicemail. Blocked number. A woman's voice. Flat, strained, like someone trying not to cry. Hi, this is Lauren. I just wanted to... I didn't know. I didn't know it was your building. I didn't mean any of that back then. I was just being stupid. I'm sorry. There was a pause, then softer. I hope I didn't embarrass you. We're going through a lot. Click. That was it. No follow-up, no requests, no pleading, just raw, uneasy honesty. I sat with that message for a long time. Not because I needed it, but because part of me recognized it. She wasn't the same woman who laughed at the table. Not anymore. People change when they lose footing. when the ground they thought was solid turns to mud. Daniel had called once in the past month. A short, awkward conversation. "How are things?" he'd asked. "Busy," I'd said. He didn't ask what I was busy with, and I didn't offer. We talked about Jacob, his grades, his soccer games. Nothing deep. Before hanging up, he added, "We should come by sometime." I told him, "Sure," but I didn't give a date. I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't opening the door either. Let them knock. Let them earn their way back in. In the meantime, Lauren's voicemail stayed on my phone. I never deleted it. I didn't return it either. Some apologies don't need a response. They just need to be heard. It took less than 48 hours after that voicemail for the full weight of truth to come crashing down on their household. I wasn't there, of course, but I heard about it. From Tony. His nephew worked part-time at the same office complex, handling weekend landscaping. Said he saw Lauren sitting in her car outside the building, crying. Not the delicate kind, the full-body, shoulders-shaking kind. She wasn't wearing her uniform. She hadn't come to clean. She just parked and sat there for nearly an hour, staring at the windows. Then she left. That evening, I got another voicemail, this time from Daniel. "Dad, I think we need to talk." His voice sounded different. Not casual, not entitled, just stripped down. I didn't call back, not immediately. The next day, my phone rang again. "Same number," I answered. "Dad," he said quickly, is it true? The building, the offices, all of it?" I didn't speak for a second. Let him feel the silence. Then, "Yes." He inhaled sharply. "I didn't know," he said. "Lauren didn't know." "I know. We thought—" He stopped himself. "We thought you were just retired." "I am," I said. "This is what I do now." Another pause. Then, voice shaking slightly. "She feels awful. I'm not interested in how she feels." Silence. "I'm not angry," I added, calmer. "But I'm not inviting you to make this about your guilt." "Dad, come on. You're punishing us." "No," I said. "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just living my life. She's working weekends. We're trying. Things haven't been easy. I know. So what do we do now?" I let out a breath, looked out the window at the quiet street below. "You do what you've always done," I said. "Figure it out." And I hung up. There were no fireworks, no screaming, just distance. And for the first time in a long time, I felt okay with that. The year ended quietly. No grand confrontations, no final speeches, just colder mornings, shorter days, and the slow rhythm of life falling back into place. Lauren didn't return to the cleaning job. A polite cancellation email came from a generic address. "Due to schedule changes, we are withdrawing from the contract. Thank you for the opportunity." I didn't reply. Daniel didn't call again either. Not for Christmas, not for New Year's. I spent the holidays alone, not lonely, alone. There's a difference. I had a warm house, my books, my routines. I still walked every morning, still drank coffee from the same chipped mug, still drove the same truck with a squeaky door that only I knew how to shut right. And I still walked through my buildings once a week. Quietly. No clipboard, no inspection. Just presence. One Saturday in January, I stood on the top floor of the newest property, a modest 2-story complex just leased to a small accounting firm. I leaned against the window, looked down at the clean sidewalks, the trimmed hedges, the newly painted signs. It was mine, all of it, built not out of spite, but out of something deeper, something older, dignity. They never saw me coming. And that's fine. Some victories don't need parades. Some wins are quiet, like a check deposited at the end of the month. Or the silence that follows after someone who once laughed at you learns how to live without making noise. I didn't need to be admired. I didn't need an apology. I just needed to know I was never small. And I knew that now.